Okay, Boker Tov, everybody. Today we learn, of course, as always, the Ili Nishmat Avigdor Chai Avram ben Meir Tzvi Rachalea. In addition, should be Ili Nishmat Yakir Shmuel ben Yehuda Hashem Yikom Damo, and for the Refuah Shlema for Yishai Engelman, Hashem should send him a Refuah Shlema. I talked to a very close friend of his last night to understand how unbelievable nes this is that he is alive. Received shrapnel and tore up his liver. And the fact that he was communicative yesterday and alert and awake is nothing short of a nes galui. And we pray for all of our soldiers, both on the front line and wherever they are serving in all kochot habitachon, to stay safe, and those who have been injured, God forbid, refuah shlema. Okay, we kind of went through a little bit of this Mishnah, number 9 or 10 or 11, depending on the printing, where it lists all the different descriptions of various people, of the students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and extols each one in a different way. And we looked at an introduction, an overview from Me'am Lo'ez last time, and that's where we left off. I'm going to go back now and talk about each one individually. And the first one was when we referred to, oops, I just turned the page to the right Mishnah. That'll be very helpful. Rabbi Elazar ben Harkonos was a bor sud, she'eno me'abed tifa. That's where we're going to go back to now. Rabbi Elazar ben Harkonos was a person who everything he remembered, everything he learned, everything he learned, he retained everything, just like a pit that did not lose a single drop of water. So the question is, what is this imagery? Those of you know, I love imagery. So whenever there's a Mishne that uses imagery, it's very special to me. What is this imagery specifically about this pit, this water cistern? So Avigdor Shanan, who some of you may have heard of, may not, brilliant Talmud Chacham, has a book that he had a quote from him a few times on Pirke Avot, and he tells us something interesting. He puts it into historical perspective. And he says that why does Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai specifically use this idea of a pit that doesn't lose, a pit that has been plastered to seal it and it doesn't lose a single drop? He says because that time in history, first of all, we know that even to today, that most of the water that we have in Israel is rainwater, which we rely on for winter to get the rain, which is to sustain us throughout the summer months as well. And how do they do that? How would they save water? So today we have very modern types of abilities to preserve rainwater, to use rainwater. Of course, desalination Israel's in a different category altogether. If I'm not mistaken, Israel desalinates over 90% of its water. The closest country comes close as a matter of like 6 or 7%. So it's not like we're close, there's someone behind us. It's like a different planet. In any case, the wells, as I said, were covered, were plastered on the inside in order to keep them sealed. And what was the importance of the well? The importance was pretty obvious because it would be both in terms of drink and in terms of feeding the fields. If they didn't have enough water, they wouldn't have enough food, and they wouldn't have enough drinking water. So what was the test though for a well, if it was going to be good or not, or a pit that was going to hold water? It's not so much a well where they would, water's flowing into it, but it's just their cistern to collect the rainwater. Was after it would rain to see if the water level would go down without everyone drawing water out of it. If it didn't, then it meant that it was sealed properly. So Avigdor Shanan says that the reason Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai uses this particular imagery is that the sign that this well, meaning in this case the Rabbi Elazar ben Harkonos, was keeping up with what it was supposed to do in this world, was he didn't lose a single drop in this metaphor, meaning of his knowledge. It's also interesting, he notes, that in most cases, these cisterns were private. They were not public wells or public cisterns. And it's possible his implication in making this example is also to say that much of his wisdom remained privately with him. It didn't necessarily share a lot with everybody. Now, that obviously it doesn't necessarily fit with this particular Mishnah because part of this is to say that extol their praises, but also to show what kind of Talmid Chachamim they were, and a Talmid Chacham wants to spread his knowledge. So whether they accept it or not, I'm just putting it out there. The next one is, we say as follows, is Rabbi Yoshua. Yoshua says, Ashrei Yelad Tov. Happy is the one who gave birth to him. Now, we talked about that one last week a little bit and give you a few different opinions of what exactly does that mean, because that's not a virtue. Now, if Mr. X is a great individual, we can't say that his virtue is that his mother's happy that she gave birth to him. That's maybe her nachas, but that's not his virtue. So Rashi says that it indicates that he was a baki, an expert in every single area of halacha, and because of that, he only became that way because of his mother, and therefore it kind of like as a circular thing. She's happy she gave birth to him. He's happy he gave birth to her. Rambam says he was perfect in his midot. We're going to talk about midot in the next part of the Mishnah or the next Mishnah, depending on your printing. We're going to come back to that. Others say that a person's stellar wisdom is specifically a source of pride for the parents. The idea being, put it on the most basic level, a parent goes to a parent-teachers conference, their child who's now in Kita Tet, grade 9, and they hear all kinds of wonderful things. And there's no but, like he or she is this, and this. Okay, but he should come on time or he should do his homework. There was no but. Everything was fabulous. So it's saying that he was so wonderful a person, so brilliant Talmid Chacham, both in terms of his learning and, as the Rambam says, his midot, that it gave his mother, she was this bursting with pride and with joy about her son. Every parent likes to feel that way also. But in this particular case, it's a reflection of the child in the parent. And we talked about last week about the story in Yerushalmi, where she would bring her baby. She would go to the Batei Midrash and ask for the Chachamim to daven for him, that he should be this brilliant Talmid Chacham, and then she would leave his crib always in the area of Beit Midrash, so all he would hear was Torah. Those other possibilities, but we're going to leave it with that. The next individual we say is Rabbi Yossi, was a chassid. Rabbi Yossi being a chassid, and I'm not going to get into too much on him, just going to mention that for this class, preceding this class, we learned Mesilat Yesharim, and we spent quite a bit of time on that topic of chassid. In English, I've seen it translated saint, seen it as someone pious, but it's someone who is medakdek in all of Torah. Person doesn't mean the others were not, but one of his stellar ideas was that he was a chassid. And I'm going to read to you here. The one statement that Rav Kahati tells us is Shamit Naheg Lifnim Mishurat Hadin. It wasn't just that he kept Torah, but he went above and beyond. I'll give you one example. Whenever I teach the topic of Lifnim Mishurat Hadin, which in English we say means above the letter of the law or beyond the letter of the law, I give the same example, and that is we know that if you find a lost object that has a sign on it, siman, that you have a requirement to return it. But if you find something that even has a siman, but it's obvious the owner gave up hope, you're in the Vadi and you see under a bush an old soccer ball with someone's name on it, you have no responsibility, no requirement whatsoever to return it, because by now that person has given up hope of ever getting it back. Yeush. But if you want to be a good person, you can do asita yashar v'atov, you do the right thing, that you can return it, and you get a mitzvah hashavat avedah. There's no requirement to do it, but once you've done it, you've done the lifnim mishurat hadin, or you've gone beyond the letter of the law, and that was the way he acted in his life. Rabbi Shimon ben Netanel Yerechet, he was a person who feared sin, and we talked again last week a little bit about that. Now, what does it mean to be a Yerechet? So there's two levels. One level is that he was afraid to do a sin. It was like, meaning he wasn't walking around like, oh my God, I'm going to sin. It was his awareness of any pitfall that he came across, that he would be able to shut it down and move on, and not to do an Aveirah. That's and the simplest level is because of the fear of an onesh, fear of punishment. Now, when you're a child, that's maybe one way and not in a mean way. You don't want to give to plant things in a child's head like, oh, if you do this, God's going to smite you. You know, God forbid. You don't want to teach a child that. Hashem is a loving God, etc. But at some point, a child does learn in their growing up. They learn about what an onesh is or a punishment is. So a person who is afraid to do an avirah because of an onesh, okay, that's yirei chet, but that's only one level. But a person who's afraid to do a chet or a sin because he doesn't want to disappoint Hashem, he doesn't want to make Hashem upset with him, so to speak, in quotes, that's a very different level. It's not because you don't want the onesh. Fine, you don't want the onesh, but you also don't want to make your parent, Hashem, to feel bad about this. So they have yirei chet. So the next individual is Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, Ma'ayana Mitgaber, an overflowing spring, a wellspring. There's a pasuk in Mishne, which I was not aware of this pasuk until the first time I published a book. And all of a sudden, everyone's giving me a bracha, Yafutzu Ma'ayanatecha Chutza. Literally means that your wellspring should overflow outwards, meaning you should just continue doing what you're doing and just have more items to write, which I am, Baruch Hashem. So it is not natural for a ma'ayan to overflow. It just ma'ayan flows naturally. It's a natural spring. The advantage is it never dries up. Unlike a riverbed, a ma'ayan always is getting new fresh water. It's flowing through there. So he was overflowing with chokhmah. If I take a glass and I fill it, there's just so much it will hold up to here. After that, it literally will start to overflow, will no longer hold anything. So does that mean that his chokhmah, his brilliance, his genius, when it overflowed, it was unusable? Does that mean? Of course it doesn't mean that. It meant that the idea was that his mind was so broad that even things that naturally would not be retained in the mind were still retained. And in a metaphorical sense, his brain was, if you can picture that, like his mind was overflowing with information, with ideas, with genius, and with Torah. And that's the Ma'ayana Mitgaber. In the end of the Mishnah, when it talks about the Machriya, like if you put Rabbi Elazar ben Arach on one side and you put everyone else on the other side, he would outweigh them. We're talking about two different types of strengths. Remember, we said last week, and I know I keep saying we said last week, but it kind of ties back in. I don't want to lose the momentum. Is that we saw two different opinions of if you put this rabbi on the one side versus everybody else, he would outweigh everybody. And if you put this rabbi on the other side, he would outweigh everybody. And we came to the conclusion that it's not a contradiction, that Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai actually said both. He was talking about two different types of individuals. One who is, we're talking like the difference basically between breadth and depth, between someone who is great in Bekius, who's like has tremendous amounts of information and knowledge, versus someone who's able to have a very deep and insightful view of something. And both are necessary. You cannot, a person's personality usually is has one strength when it comes to this. Either they're very much into more and more and more and more knowledge and information and overflowing of knowledge, but not necessarily extremely deep as far as being able to drill down. Others very much will take smaller amounts of information and be able to drill down. And the greats, like these individuals, are a combination of both. And they have inside of them both opinions and different approaches in life. I want to tell you something I read a couple of weeks ago. Actually, before that, just like an introduction to it, that as we read this Mishnah, you get a sense, remember, what's the purpose of Pirke Avot? The purpose of Pirke Avot is to teach us lessons. You and I, at least I'm not going to be Ma'ayana Mitgaber. I'm not going to be a Yerei like this level. I'm not going to be the Borsud Sheino Me'abed Tipa. I just know it's not self-deprecation. It's just I know who I am, and that's not where my mind is. I don't have that ability. Maybe if I sap the next 150 years, 200 years, 500 years, maybe I get to some of that. I don't know. But where I am in life, it's not going to happen. Or it isn't happening. Not that it's not good. I should never say it's not, because one never knows. But the purpose of Pirke Avot is to teach us something, how to act, how to learn, what to strive for. So it's not that it's like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be like that, but rather it's to encourage us to shoot for something greater than we're doing right now. In addition to that, it's to give us perspective, the perspective of what Torah is all about. We say that Torah is the guide map, the map. The Torah is our fundamental principle. The Torah is what helps us with everything in life. But I'll tell you a brief story I read the other day, Rav Chaim Kanievsky Zatzal, which really shows where the mind, because all this particular Mishne has to do a lot with the mind of Gadol. The mind is Rav Chaim Kanievsky, and after he passed away, it seems like more and more of these stories come out that just tell us the absolute genius of this individual. True story. It took place in New York. In the early 90s was the .com explosion. All of a sudden, the internet started going crazy. The birth of the real, all the different, this .com, was called the .com explosion. And there was one guy, a young guy in his 20s, who lived in, I don't remember if it was Borough Park, Flatbush, I don't remember honestly, who all of a sudden overnight became a multi-gazillionaire. Some idea that he had for a website, and he was worth, in a matter of just a few months, $90 million. He wasn't poor to begin with, but he all of a sudden almost overnight, became worth $90 million. And what he was scared of was an ayin hara. He was scared that his neighbors would be jealous and give him an ayin hara, and he didn't know what to do with that. So he flew to Israel, and he went to talk to Rav Chaim Kanievsky. And he said, listen, I just, in business, came into a lot of money. I'm worth almost $100 million, and I'm afraid of an ayin hara. So listen to what Rav Kanievsky said to him. He said, as a result of this, do you have more chavrusos? He would never say chavrutot. Do you have more chavrusos? Do you have more learning partners? He said, no. He said, so what do your neighbors have to be jealous of you for? Like, he didn't even conceive of the fact that this man has all this money, and that could be the source of people being jealous of him. His whole mind, his whole focus, everything was Torah. So he says, if you didn't, because of this money, you don't have extra chavrutot, what are they to be jealous for? You don't have any extra learning going on in your life. What are they? So it's a double thing he's telling him. Number one, he's telling him, you don't have to worry about the ayin hara. And number two, he's basically saying, you got all this money, you should be learning more also. I do know a person, I will not make reference to any way, shape, or form of an identification, whose father sold his business a couple of years ago in the States for a little bit over $500 million, and shared the wealth with his children. And one of his children, who I personally know, he spends, and he doesn't come from a yeshiva background. It's not like he's been like the black cat yeshiva kind of thing. He's a Dati Leumi guy, and he made two decisions. One is he's going to spend a large part of his time learning now. He's young. He's not 40 yet. A large part of his time learning, which he does daily, and writes a parsha sheet that he sends out to his family. In addition to that, he spends, I think it's Sunday, in front of a computer with an Excel spreadsheet, giving money away every week to tzedakah. He says, he cannot use, in his whole lifetime, he will not be able to use all this money he's been given. Keep in mind, of course, it's gaining interest in all along the way. So he's giving away money. It's a great perspective. It really shows where a person's values are. And that's what this mission is about. It's about values. What's important to you? How do you use it? How do you grow from it? So that leads us to this next topic. We're talking now about what were their character traits, or what were their special scintillating features. So we said, without the names now, one was a pit that didn't lose a single drop, retained all his brilliance. One was a chassid. One was a yerei chet. One was a ma'ayan hamitgaber, the overflowing, right? But what about character trait? What about character? What was it that they really saw or did in their lives that would make them even greater? What am I saying? I could sit and learn Torah all day long. I wish. I could sit and learn Torah all day long. But if I'm not a nice person, what is that Torah worth? It's worth the fact that I learned and I get sachar, I get a reward for the Torah I learned. but it also in some way can be a chil Hashem. The Torah can be a chil Hashem when someone looks at you and says, "This is how Ben Torah acts. This is how someone learns Torah acts." Then I don't want any part of that. By the way, I've heard that plenty. Not about me, I hope, but I've heard it plenty. So the question now, this next Mishnah, which in mine is Mishnah number Tet, could be Yud, which starts with the words. I'm going to read through it. I'm going to read through it and translate. It's a very long Mishnah. Read through and translate. And we're going to go back and I'll explain. Amar lahem. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said to his students, what would be the right path, the correct path in life that someone should stick to? Rabbi Lezer Omer, so he responded, Rabbi Lezer said, Ayin Tova, a good eye. And obviously, everything here needs deeper explanation. Rabbi Yoshua Omer, Chaver Tov, a good friend. How is that a derech yeshara? How is that a good path in life? Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi said, Shachen Tov, a good neighbor. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Haroeh Tanolad. Haroeh Tanolad literally means the one who sees that which is giving birth, or which is born. Also not very clear. Rabbi Lezer Omer, Lev Tov. Rabbi Lezer says it's a good heart. So each one gave their opinion of to what is the proper path in life one should stick to. No, it's beyond the actual keeping Torah, beyond the actual doing the mitzvot. Tachlis is a ben adam, it's a human being. What's the right path to choose? So they each give their opinion. Amar lahem, so Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai responded after hearing their opinions. He says, I think that Rabbi Elazar ben Arach's opinion makes the most sense because in his, it includes all of yours. Because he said, Ayin Tova. Okay, what does that mean? What does it mean that, I'm going to go down here for 1 second and read something. Yeah, what does it mean that everything, I knew it was wrong. It's not Rabbi Elazar's statement, not Rabbi Eliezer, it's Rabbi Elazar, the last one. Lev Tov, a good heart. I didn't even read it. I skipped it. That's why it didn't make sense to me. Sorry. Let's go back. So Rabbi Elazar said, which is Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, said, Lev Tov, a good heart. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said that his opinion, meaning the opinion of Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, which he said that the right path in life to choose is Lev Tov, a good heart, really is the best answer because it includes everything else. Because included in his words, meaning Lev Tov, a good heart, is all of what you have said. Okay, so then it does the opposite. And then it says the following. Amar lahem, again, Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai asked the following, or says them. Go out and see what kind of characteristics should one have that he should stay away from. What bad character traits, bad actions should someone distance himself from? And again, they each give an answer. Rabbi Elazar Omer ayin ra'ah. He says the opposite now. What he said before, he says an evil eye. Doesn't mean evil, bad eye. Rabbi Yoshua Omer chaver ra. Again, he says the opposite of what he said before. A bad friend. Rabbi Yosef Omer shachen ra, being a bad or having or being a bad neighbor. Rabbi Shimon Omer haloveh ve'eno meshalem. He says a different one. He said it's someone who loans money. One who borrows money and doesn't pay it back. Person who borrows from a person is like borrowing from God. For it says, I'm not going to translate because when we get to that part of the Mishnah down the road, I'll explain. Rabbi Elazar said, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, levra, a bad heart. Amar lahem, again, roe ani divrei Elazar ben Arach, shebichad v'arav divrechem. The fact that Rabbi Elazar ben Arach said, the bad heart, in quotes, meaning having ill will, maybe, we'll see, includes everybody else's statement, and therefore I think that's the most appropriate answer. Okay. Now we have to understand this. We have to understand a bunch of things here. But in order to understand what they're saying, we have to digress and talk about two statements. One, look at the beginning of the Mishnah again. The beginning of the Mishnah says, "Tz'u u're'u," go out and look. Ezohi derech yeshara she'yidbak ba ha'adam. What is the proper path, a good path, that a person should cling to? It's a very unusual series of choices of words. What does it mean, tz'u u're'u? Why doesn't it just say, Amar lahem, he said to them, Ezohi derech yeshara shel adam. Right? Just say very simply, what is the proper path in life for a person? Again, he's evidently talking about midot. Again, what's this tz'u u're'u? That's first. Second question, what does it mean, she'yidbak ba, that a person should cling to? I have on my shelf, as many of you do, Siyat Nisharim. Some of you may have Derech Hashem. Some of you may have Orchot Tzadikim. Some of you may have all these different books of Musar that teach you how to be a good person, not just how to teach and learn Torah, but how to be a good person. And I can sit here, I can learn it all day long, I can teach it all day long. But how do I start to really live it? How do I really inculcate that into my life? So part of that has to do with observation. If you were to, and you don't do it now, you can if you want, but I'm saying if you were to kind of just take a pause for a moment and think about somebody, I say the character trait of somebody who is always helpful, is always there to help somebody, or someone does chesed all the time. Every one of you could think of somebody that, you know what, that epitomizes that is this individual 100%. I don't know anybody greater than this and that. But why? How is it that you thought about that person? Because you've observed this person, you know about this person. And what that does is, instinctively you should be doing chesed for people. Instinctively you should be there to help people. Instinctively all these other things. But when you see it in somebody else, it should act as an inspiration to you. Go out and look. There's only one other place I know of that uses that expression. It's similar, that we actually say, and that's in the Haggadah. Said, say ulmad, go out and learn. So the whole section where we start talking about the psukim, it has a different reason, a different meaning over there. And if you have a minute, you go look at some commentaries about that. But here, the reason he's saying when he says it again later is go out, because it's not enough to know something instinctively when it comes to midot. The way you develop your midot is trying to find somebody who has these character traits that you want to emulate. And by doing so, you strengthen your midot. And then he says, like I said, it seems to be superfluous. Ezohi derech yeshara. By the way, the word derech in Hebrew is feminine. It's nekeva. That's why it's yeshara. So it's a common mistake people make, like the word pa'am. They'll say pa'am echad. It's not. It's pa'am achat. Because pa'am, for whatever reason, is nekeva. And the word derech, it's derech yeshara. A derech aruka, long way. Derech tzara, short way. So derech is nekeva. So derech yeshara she'yidbak ba ha'adam, that a person should cling to. What does that mean? Does that mean that he should cling to something? So now we're going to not digress. We're going to expand something. Because we're doing it on Zoom, I decided to make a couple of slides. Not to worry, I'm not going to be reading every single thing that's going to be on the slide. As soon as I find it. Let me go back up here. Okay, make it bigger. We're going to talk for a few minutes about what's called dvekus, or clinging to God. I just said before that how you improve your midot is clinging to somebody who has a midah that you want to emulate. That is going from us to a person. Now we're going to work about it with this backwards. First, we have to talk about the words in the I only have 5 here, but there are a number of others. The word dvekut or some other form, lidofkabo. I'm going to look just for a minute at these psukim. We're going to talk about this concept. Okay, this is going to help us understand this Mishnah and other things in general, but especially this Mishnah of increasing and improving our midot. So there are many places in Tanakh which speaks about the concept of dveikut with God, clinging to God. The very, very first mention of davak is al ken yazov ish taviv et imo v'davak beishto. When it talks about when Adam is going to be with Chava, he's going to be his wife, she's going to be his wife. It says, therefore, man should leave his mother and his father and cling to his wife. The dveikut, the unity, the coming together of the husband and wife. So, but right now we're going to talk about the unity of the coming together with Hashem and us. So in Dvarim number 1, Tema, it's a pasuk you probably know. Tema devekim b'Hashem Elokechem, those of you who cling to God, Chayim kulchem hayom, you are all alive today. I'm going to just read the pasukim and translate, and then on the next slide we'll talk about them. Number 2, et Hashem Elokecha tira, Hashem your God you should fear. Otota Avot, you should serve him. Uvot tidbak, and to him you should cling. Uvishmoti shaveya, and by his name you should give an oath. By the way, on the top of the page you'll see in parentheses that dveikut is actually considered one of the 613 mitzvot, which is pretty cool. Number 3, it says in Varim Yud Aleph, Ki im shamo tishmerun et kol mitzvah zot. If you'll keep all the mitzvot I teach, I'm giving you, asher nochim etzaveh etchem la'asota, that I'm commanding you to do, lahava et Hashem Elokechem, to love God, lalachet b'chol derachav, to walk in his ways, uledovka bo, and to cling to him. So in number 1 is just general, saying clinging to God. Number 2 is it's connected to fear of God and serving God. Number 3 is more drilling down a little bit more into the actions of doing the mitzvot, loving Hashem, walking in his ways. Number 4, you should walk after God. You should fear him. You should keep his mitzvot. Listen to his voice. And him you should serve. In him you should cling. Final pasuk. Again, there's a bunch more. I'm just using these 5. To love God, to listen to his voice. And to cling to him. Why? He is the source of life. And he connects it also to the land of Israel. So at this point, we always see from these psukim, in a very shitchi way, in a very surface way, is there's some idea of clinging to God. Now, if I take, in modern Hebrew, the word devik is glue, it can mean tape. So if I take a piece of tape, and I tape it, that's not a good idea to use. Here's my Mishne. I take a piece of tape and I tape it here. The glue clings to and sticks to the book. So what does that mean, though, by God? What does that mean? So we take a look at the next slide. We're going to take a couple of ones looking at the Ramchal, Chaim Lutzato, the author of the Siyat Yesharim and others, and we'll look at a statement from Rav Kook. Ramchal says in Derech Hashem, Ki kechol, I'm over here right now. Ki kechol sha'adam yishtalem b'midotav u'ma'asav. The more a person becomes whole, complete with his midot and his actions, kach harbe adveikut ba'el. So too will he cling closer to God. What does this mean? Ramchal is telling us that the better you are at your midot, or chesed, and whatever else you can think of, the closer you are to clinging to Hashem. Klomar, hadveikut musaget lav dafka b'machshava al ha'el. The musagat, sorry. No. Okay, whatever. The veikut is not just something that's in the mind. Oh, I'm thinking I'm getting closer to God. I love God, all that. אלא בכלל המחשבות והמעשים של אדם, לפי דבריו, וכפי מה שירבה בשלמויות, כך הוא מרבה האחיזה, ההתאבקות בו. It's not just, you know what, most people think, what does it mean to be dveikut b'Hashem? Oh, I'm going to sing the song. It's going to be in the spiritual mood. I'm going to get uplifted. By the way, there was a group called Dveikus in the 70s, I think. That's time of Ruach Revival and other bands of that nature. And this is going to get me closer to Hashem, and I'm going to think about Hashem and get close. Ramchal is telling us that that's fine, that's true, but there's another way, and that is through your midot, improving and working on your midot. Rav Kook tells us as follows. I'm over here now. The commandment of clinging to God and his midot It means hitabkut bidrachav uvmidotav. It means clinging to his ways and his midot. Now, I'm not going to finish the rest of this statement here, and I want to explain what that means with the use of the next slide. Oh, I didn't put it up here. So let me just tell you what it means. There is a couple places that said, can we actually cling to God? He's Eshochla. Hashem is a consuming fire. But it means the expression that we've used in this class, used in Pirke Avot, used in Tefillah, used in almost anything, because it applies everywhere. Mahu afata. Just like Hashem is something, you should be the same thing. Just like Hashem is Gomel Chasadim, just like Hashem does acts of chesed, so you should. Just like Hashem visits the sick, like Avraham Avinu after his brit, you should visit the sick. And on and on and on. So now what do we see? Take it off of this. Now what we see is we're coming to almost a full circle. This Mishnah we're in the process of talking about right now is talking about each one of those opinions as to what is the best midah to follow. We haven't described and explained and drilled down to any of them yet. But just in general terms, it's a lev tov and ro'et hanolad, chaver tov, shachen tov. But what's the ultimate goal of all these? The ultimate goal is dveikut, is clinging to God, because by doing these things, we're mahu afata. Just like God does X, so too we do X. And that's why Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, in organizing and editing the Mishnah, starts off with the words, Ezohi derech yishara sheyidbak ba ha'adam. Why does he want to cling to them? Because by clinging to them, it means he's clinging to Hashem. That's the veikut ba Hashem. And why does it say that you should do these things and find somebody, go out and find someone to imitate? Because that's the idea that you want to be imitating Hashem. You want to see someone doing that. You want to imitate that. Imitate in a nice way, not in a bad way. So this Mishnah, what could seem to be this initial statement, I don't know if, let me just see if Rav Kahati makes any comment here. No, he quotes Rabbeinu Yonah and a couple others, but it doesn't make that full to and hidabeko. I'm sure I'm not the only one that sees this in the Mishnah. I've only looked like a few commentaries, but I'm sure that's kind of, to me, it was obvious that that's the internal meaning of the hidden meaning of the deeper meaning of tzu'u. Go out. You have to actually observe, see what's being done to learn and how to do something properly, and then it leads to dveikut b'Hashem. So let's talk about for a few minutes we'll get to just a couple of them, the different opinions. The first opinion was ayin tova, a good eye. And for those of you who like baseball, you'll know that used expression a lot. Good eye, good eye. Has nothing to do with how at all, like baseball. Number one, it means looking at the positive of everything. Something bad happens, you still are able to say gamzo l'tova. And we talked about this before. Also in the past, I think I gave a separate shiur on the topic. Also, that's for the best. Whatever happened, it's also for the best. It's very, 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 very difficult to find that in some circumstances, especially what we're going through now. But an ayin tova always means to look at the positive of something. It also can mean b'samech b'chelko, that you look at what you have and you're happy with it. You're happy with what you have. You're not thinking like, ugh, I wish I had what that guy has. And by the way, that's not lo tachmo, don't covet. That's absolutely not. It's just jealousy. Jealousy is a very bad character trait. So if jealousy is a bad character trait, saying, oh, I want what he has, the opposite of, oh, I'm happy with what I have, Baruch Hashem, he has what he has, that's a positive. It also could mean something that we talked about in previous Mishnah, in a prior Mishnah, have they done kol adam l'chol adam, or et kol adam is different yourself, that you should always give someone the benefit of the doubt. The only time you don't need to give someone the benefit of the doubt is a Rasha Gummer. We know for sure the person he purposely is Mechal Shabbat and he hate God, I'm going to do everything against God, then you have no mitzvah to judge him favorably. And not only that, you're allowed to judge him negatively. But in almost every other case, it's kind of hard to find a Rasha Gummer, complete 100% through and through Rasha, evil individual. Then it means ayin tova means judging a person favorably. What about chaver tov? How is that a character trait? So it could be two possibilities here. Number one, we talked about a different Mishnah, said Knei lecha chaver. We talked in depth. What do you mean to Knei lecha chaver? It's someone who you should acquire for yourself a friend. What's the purpose of said friend? It's not just to go to a game with, not just to go out to maybe have coffee. It means somebody who will help you, set you on the straight and narrow, someone who's close enough to tell you, look, that's not the right thing to do. You shouldn't do this. This is the right thing to do. Here's what you know what, Yashikov, you're doing this a great job at that. That's a chaver tov because they help guide you in life. So it is a character trait. How is it a character trait? Because it means you're open to critique. There's a difference between critique and criticism. Criticism means, oh, you made another mistake on your what you wrote. Criticism is, let me help you fix this. It doesn't look how it should look. So that's one aspect. Rabbeinu Yonah says it means exactly the opposite. It means be the moral compass for somebody else. Chaver tov doesn't mean you should just, because there's another mission that tells us that knei lecha chaver, you should acquire for yourself a friend for this purpose. He's saying it means the opposite. You should be that friend. You should be the chaver and be there for somebody that you can be able to be the guiding light and and how does that help? Because you also have to be, generally, it doesn't always work, but it also, not only you helping enlighten somebody else, but you're also trying to keep true to yourself. Because the more you say something, let's say, and I get this example last night, let's say I don't thank God. Let's say I struggle constantly with Lashon Hara, and I want to talk Lashon Hara, but I decide to give a shiur in Lashon Hara. So the more I try to speak about it and learn about it and teach about it, it's going to sink into myself as well. So it's a character trait saying that maybe by being a chaver tov, maybe things that I'm not as strong in, by trying to help somebody else in it, it will chazek me, it'll strengthen me as well. There's one more opinion, I don't remember who said it, that it also would help hopefully lead to less peer pressure. You have a group of friends, a number of them want to do something that's not so above board. And one of them says, look, what do you think? It's your good, very close friends. Look, I don't think it's the right thing. So because of that good friend, or the opposite, you're the good friend that says it, that you'll avoid the pitfall of the peer pressure and not do what the group wants. Okay, Bezrat Hashem, we will get together 2 weeks from today. And as some of you know already, my nephew's getting married next week and a lot of family in, so I'm leaving my time open next week for that. So Bezrat Hashem, 2 weeks from today, which will be the 18th, Bezrat Hashem, we will meet and continue the class then, and hopefully in person if it works. Rhonda was kind enough to tell me that we did have the ability to learn in person, but for various reasons I needed to do it on Zoom today. So thank you very much. Have a good day, and because it's already Thursday morning, Shabbat Shalom and Yisrael Tovot.